I get up, time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Hey guys, it's Wildkard here. Just want to give you an update on the latest build that I've been playing with. Now, this is a split arrow barrage poison assassin build. I've been doing a lot of testing recently when it comes to cluster jewels. Now, outside of the obvious herald stacking, there are actually a lot of super strong jewels that's out there that's not really being utilized at the moment. Now, one of the reasons why the cluster jewels nowadays are so strong is the fact that you can have multiple medium cluster jewels with the same effect stacked multiple times on your tree. And that is what I've kind of come up with this build. This is basically a very classic poison strategy, build strategy. You just play as an assassin and you apply poison, and you try to stack as much poison as you can. And as an assassin, your Ascendancy allows you to ramp up the poison damage the more poison you apply. So what the cluster jewels have introduced is you're able to stack poison duration medium cluster jewels that extends the poison duration significantly more than what you were used to be able to do, and thus creating extremely high DPS numbers, and thus making this build a very potent and fun build to play with. The build is currently looking at over 35 million damage over time on a non-boss target. Now, this is not exactly true because that the damage is actually ramped up over time. So you're not actually going to be able to get this damage right away. And depends on the situation, you may never be able to reach this kind of damage during a fight. But theoretically, this is the maximum DPS you are able to put out with my build. The most accurate estimate for this build is actually around 10 million or so DPS. Now, the Assassin Ascendancy really thrives on poison duration, and the premier node to achieve that is this node called Nauseous Strike. Now, the most important part of this node, and it's the part that we're trying to scale, is the part that says 5% increased poison duration for each poison you have inflicted recently. So what this node does is, the more poison you can inflict in recently, which is 4 seconds, the more poison you can inflict during that window, the longer the poison durations will be, and the longer the poison duration allows you to stack more poison on a target. So basically, the more poison you can inflict, the longer the duration, the more poison you can stack on a target, which is why you can ramp up to such a huge amount of DPS with this talent node. Now, the second most important ascendancy is Toxic Delivery. What Toxic Delivery basically, in essence, allows us to do is scale crit. So how does crit work with poison, you might ask? So how crit works is this. There's a node called Perfect Agony, What this node does is it converts 50% of your critical strike multiplier into damage over time multiplier. So let's say, hypothetically, you have 100% critical strike multiplier. When you have perfect agony, 50% of that, when you crit, becomes damage over time multiplier. And 50% damage over time multiplier is literally 50% more damage when it comes to calculation of poison. Now you might say, why is this node not selected? Because we're actually getting this node from a flask called Corralito's Signature. Now this flask grants perfect agony during flask effect. So that's basically how we get the benefit of this node without selecting it. What Toxic Delivery does is, with each application of the poison, it increases our critical strike chance, which means that we're gonna have a higher opportunity to convert that critical strike multiplier into damage over time multiplier, which really ramps up the damage very quickly. Another very important node that the assassin offers is Mistwalker. I actually think this node is extremely good, because what he does is, not only that he makes you faster, allows you to clear quicker, but it also grants you a lot of dodge and survivability. Surprisingly, I almost never died despite having, as you can see, less than 5,000 health. So the final node that you want to pick is either Opportunistic or Ambush and Assassinate. Ambush and Assassinate gives you more damage when it comes to clear speed, and Opportunistic basically gives you more damage on a boss. So for my pick is Opportunistic. What it basically does is gives you more damage when there's one unique enemy near you. Now, when it comes to the talent tree, the cluster jewels is the superstar of the build. Everything else is quite standard around the build. You basically just get poison nodes, bow nodes, and just life nodes. Now, when it comes to the cluster jewels, there are a few very important cluster jewels that you want to look out for, that really fixes all the issues and really ramps up the damage for the build. Now, one of them is Overwhelming Malice. So what this does is, every time you crit, you get Unholy Might. Now, what Unholy Might does is, I haven't got this clicked. In fact, if I click on it, it's actually a stupid amount of damage when you click on it. And as I mentioned before, we're playing an assassin where we are scaling crit, and we have, as you can see, 80% chance to crit. It's actually super nice to have this. Basically, you're gonna have Overwhelming Malice up almost all the time. Field of Fight is probably one of the most important nodes you want to get in your big wheel, because what it does is, it allows you to save a point on the tree, so you don't need to pick a mana leech node on the tree. And it gives you damage, attack speed, which is something that you really want for the build, and it gives you just damage while leeching, so just extra damage and the benefit of mana leech. So these are the two nodes that you really want to look for in your large cluster jewels. Now, the medium cluster jewels is the meat of the DPS. So Circle of Oblivion basically allows us to really increase that poison duration to allow us to stack up that DPS, and synergizes significantly with our Ascendancy. You want to get Hemorrhage, or whatever it's called, Hemorrhage. What this does is, it gives you a super high damage over time multiplier when you crit. And it's like I was mentioning before, we are scaling crit, so this synergizes perfectly with our crit portion of the Ascendancy. So Circle of Oblivion synergizes the duration part of our Ascendancy, and Hemorrhage synergizes the crit part of our Ascendancy, which is why we are able to scale so much damage with these medium cluster jewels. And then ideally, you want just 4 of these jewels, which I have 3 of. 3 of the exact same cluster jewels Ideally, I want this one to also be hemorrhage, and that'll maximize your DPS. For me, I chose Feast of Flesh for the 10 life gain for each enemy hit by your attacks. As you can see that our life pool is not really that high, right? Our life pool is not really that high, but having Feast of Flesh allows, basically, as you probably noticed, right? It says 10 life gain for each enemy hit by your attacks, but if you look at my life leech on hit rate, it goes from 2000 to 2500. You're like, why did it go up by 500 when it's only 10 life gain for each enemy hit? The reason being is it's 10 life per enemy hit per arrow. So as you can imagine, Barrage shoots 10 arrows. I think mine shoots about 9 or 10 arrows. We'll have a look a bit later. You actually get you 500 life per hit. And this is the best part. If you have 4 of these, it's 2000. Life gain on hit is instant. And in this case, I get 2000 life on hit recovered instantly every time I fire my arrows. That's why I chose this nodes. I think they're extremely overpowered, and extremely good for my build. As you can see, that's, you know, almost 50% of my life gained instantly every time I shoot. We have a split arrow set up for clearance. Basically, you put a chain in the split arrow. It just ricochets everywhere and clears the map super quickly, and extremely and it's extremely potent when it comes to clear speed. If you have the money, get a woke chain. If you have a woke chain, it's absolutely bonkers. You just clear things outside of your screen, off screen everything in one hit. It's just extremely satisfying experience to play with. And everything else is pretty straightforward. We're just scaling damage over time in terms of poison. So a Swift Affliction, added chaos, woke added chaos damage, woke deadly ailment, and Veil Toxin. They're all just chaos damage and poison damage jewels. And all these woke gems are actually really cheap. You want to just pretty much get them as soon as you can use them at level 72 and start leveling up the jewels, the gems, as you're leveling up. So you can just get this at level 72 and chuck them in there and start leveling them. They're all extremely cheap because poison is not really that popular of the build. Just to get yourself going. And our single target is another 6-link with Barrage. Now, if you don't have 2 6-links, for instance, if you can't afford us, if you want to save a bit of money, you can just, you can do a gem swap with Chang. You can either do a gem swap to put Barrage support with split arrow, or you can just do a bit of a swap with Barrage and GMP with Chang with split arrow. So you can do a swap, or you can just have 2 6-links like I have here. It is absolutely viable to do a swap, because as you can notice, the support gems are pretty much the same. Now, outside of our core attack skills, we're pretty much just scaling damage over time. There we have your hit is a bit of an issue, so it's a little bit difficult with the assassin to get 100% hit. So you might want to run a precision. You want to run Ice Golem for the hit as well, and also crit is really nice with these two. We're running Herald of Agony, which gives us 10% more poison damage, and with a Ring of Nostalgia, you can increase that 10% to up to 20% more poison damage. I'm running a haste here, but haste is not the most important skill. I'm running a haste because I have a Ul's Uprising, which makes haste free. But if you don't have that, it's not too big of a deal. If you just have a rare amulet with damage over time multiplier on it, it's actually extremely good as well. In fact, sometimes I run that over the haste. I run haste for the clear speed, but if you want to fight a boss, running a rare amulet with damage over time multiplier on it is actually better. I'll get into the gear a little bit later into the guide. And Malevolence is just an aura that increases your damage over time. Pretty straightforward stuff. Withering Steps is just something that you use to move around. Plague Bearer is a skill that allows you to basically gather poison damage and it releases in a circle around you, and as mobs enter in the circle, they take poison damage and they die quicker. So basically a Plague Bearer, it's a bit more of a defensive kind of skill. So as you poison everything and they're, as they're dying from your poison, there might be, 1 second they're not dying, they're not completely dead. You open Plague Bearer, and if they're coming close to you, they will just die instantly. Or as you're running past them, they will just die instantly. Now, we're running Dual Curse in this build. As I mentioned before, we're trying to increase the duration of the poison as much as we can on our targets to stack up that damage over time. So one of the ways you can stack up really increases the poison duration on the target is a temp chain. A temp chain on the target basically increases duration of all buffs, in debuffs and buffs on the target. So having temp chain applied to the target just gives you a lot more duration on your poison. Despair is a pretty standard poison damage over time curse that allows you to just increase your damage on the poison, which comes in curse on hit from the ring. Temp chains is curse on hit with the glove corruption. I'll go into the items now and you can see where I'm getting these curses from. So here are the items. Since I just mentioned the curses, let me just go into the exact places you get the curses from. So the first curse, Temp Chain, you get that from the gloves. It's a corruption you can get on many pair of different gloves. The Embalmer is the most common gloves when it comes to just giving you poison damage and giving you it's basically it's a pretty common glove you use for any poison build. And the reason you want to use these gloves is not because they're like super good. In fact, you can get a rare pair of gloves that has chaos damage over time multiplier and attack speed, would actually work out to be higher DPS. But the reason you want these gloves is because they're really easily available to get the corruption on. This is really hard to get a rare pair of gloves with damage over time multiplier with temp chain. Ideally, that's what you want. But if you want something that's more readily available and that also helps you out with a lot of DPS, the Embalmer is actually a very, very, very good contender. So just get Embalmer. There's a lot of these available. They're really, really cheap. I got this, I think, for maybe 10 chaos. I actually couldn't believe it. I got these for some stupidly cheap price. And as you can notice, that not only that it gives you chaos damage, chaos res, and it increases poison duration, which is exactly what you want. These socket gems are supported by level 20 Vile Toxin. It's not even used. Not even used really for the build, but you can potentially utilize that as well if you wish. And the second place we get the poison from, second curse we get it from, is a curse on hit ring, Despair enemies on hit, and this comes from a hunter base, I believe. From a hunter base ring, you can get these fit into your build, and that's how you, that's the two curses we want to use. And to be able to get two curse on the target, we get a Wisdom of Doom anointment on the neck, which is this one here, which allows you to have an additional curse. Yeah, you can also get a rare body armor that gives you additional curse. There's a few other ways you can get it as well, but for me, I think this is the most efficient way and probably most cost efficient way of getting the additional curse. Is just having it on your neck, and you can just anoint that, and then you're done, and you can move on to other things. Now, when it comes to weapon, you kind of want a high physical based weapon with, if it's crafted, the most important mod is 60% chance for poison inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage. This is the most important mod on top of the high flat fizz. So you want something that's around 350 plus DPS. So I crafted this base. It's a little bit rare. I actually failed to craft it many times, and then eventually I hit this with a essence. So there is an essence that gives you added fizz. I think a very high added fizz. The added fizz on this weapon is pretty much a tier 1 added fizz. Maybe it's pretty much a tier 1 added fizz. Maybe a tiny bit less than a tier 1. And then basically, I spammed those essences until I got the 60% chance for poison to deal 100% more damage. It's actually kind of rare. I did get a bit lucky on that. And then you kind of just want to, once you get that, you kind of just want to see what you have. Annul the mods you don't want, hopefully. And then just multi-mod attack speed and increase flat fizz to give you a bow like this that's kind of close to 400 physical DPS. Now, if you don't have this bow, a Darkscorn is an extremely potent alternative for the build. So I would say start with the Darkscorn. The damage is pretty, in fact, Darkscorn is pretty hard to surpass with the rare bow. You have to get really lucky to be able to get something that I have that is better than a Darkscorn. And Darkscorn also gives you a bit of defensive by converting physical damage you taken as chaos. So Darkscorn is 100% something you want to be using to start with. The helmet I chose to use in this case is a Obscure Rantus. So what this helmet does, and the main reason I use this helmet, is for the accuracy. The accuracy in this build is really lacking a lot. If you can get the accuracy, having a rare helmet with nearby enemies takes -8 chaos resistance, have -8 reduced chaos resistance. It's actually the superior helmet to go with, and you can probably get a helmet enchant that gives you extra projectiles on your barrage, which will ramp up your single target DPS as well. Obscurantus is not really used that much. That's why I can't actually get an enchant on it with barrage or with any of the skill that I'm using. In that fact, I try to get a helmet enchant with just any skill, even the aura skills. I couldn't find one because not many people play with this helmet, and no one wants to craft a lab enchant onto this helmet. So ideally, you want to get a rare helmet, but it all comes down to how much hit chance you can squeeze out for the build. The body armor, what I have here is a little bit over the top. Ideally, if you're on a budget, you kind of just, the most important one is 10% chance to get frenzy charges. That'll give you the most single target DPS. The explosion part of the armor really allows you to clear a lot quicker. As you can see from the teaser video, everything is kind of blowing up. It actually makes a bit of a difference, because if things are not blowing up, they kind of they become a little bit pesty, because you might have, you know, some mobs die, and then there's one or two that's just kind of just like have a bit more life than the others, and they're just like sticking around, not dying. But with the explosion, they're all just gonna pop at the same time. Most times, like very rarely have one unique or elite that doesn't die. But most times, everything just dies. So the explosion is kind of really nice as well, and it really helps you out with your clear speed. So the boots, you just want to get whatever resistance you're missing. Pretty straightforward. The neck I've mentioned before. I'll drop uprising with haste, as haste reserves no mana, is one of the best ones, because we want it to have as much attack speed as we can, which scales with our tree. But if you can't afford one of these, just get a rare amulet with damage over time multiplier, and potentially you can probably get attack speed on that as well. And it's very good and very potent for the build. In fact, it might end up being more DPS than Owl's Uprising. The main benefit with haste is the movement speed. It allows you to level a bit quicker. But if you just, like, you know, it's not really that important. Overall, a rare amulet works out to be better. Circle of Nostalgia is one of the rings you want that really ramps up your DPS quite a bit. The 44% increased chaos damage while affected by Herald is nice, but the most important one is Herald of Agony has 100% increased buff effect. What this means is that the Herald of Agony gives you normally gives you 10% more poison damage, but with 100% increased buff effect, it actually gives you 20% more poison damage, and this actually significantly ramps up your damage with this ring. So definitely go out and try find a ring like this. If it's a bit too, I think they're pretty cheap now. I think I got this one for maybe 1 exalt, even with the increased max. I think it was 100 chaos actually, even with the increased maximum life. As you know, poison builds aren't that popular right now. You can get yourself a lot of this really nice gear for quite cheap. And this ring here, as I've mentioned before, just dispelled on hit and try to get as much resistance as well. You might notice here I have a lot of int. So one of the issue with the build is you're going to be lacking a bit of int. A lot of your gems are blue gems. They do need a bit of int. So you want to squeeze out a lot of int onto the ring. Another place you can get a lot of int is your neck. The rare neck can get a lot of int on it as well. And also if you're really struggling, you can get int on your boots. So Owl's Uprising, you can, if you wanted to replace that with a rare amulet, you also help you out with your int. So the int on this ring, when you're playing, probably doesn't have to be such a high roll. You can just get a low roll or even no int if you can get a lot of int on your rare necklace. Your belt is pretty straightforward. Just get whatever stats you're missing basically, and just finish it off with a jewel that gives you some crit, some life, some whatever resistance you're still missing. And that's pretty much the gear, guys. When it comes to the flask, guys, it's pretty straightforward. There's only one flask that is absolutely critical for the build, which is Corralito's signature, as I've mentioned before. Not only that, it gives you all the benefits of just, you know, extra chance to poison, the benefit of increased poison duration, which synergizes with our tree perfectly. As I mentioned, we want the duration to be as long as we can to be able to stack up as many poison as we can, and ramps up the DPS basically. And the most important aspect, as I mentioned before, it grants perfect agony during flask effect. Perfect agony converts 50% of the crit multiplier into damage over time multiplier, which is a more poison damage over time, and it's the single highest damage boost you're gonna get out of the build. Aziri's Promise also gives you a lot of damage. The main benefit of Aziri's Promise is actually the 2% chaos damage leech just live. You might find yourself, as I mentioned before, the Fist of Flesh gives you a lot of leech on hit, but the actual damage over time from chaos damage, you actually can't leech that with an on hit, because it's not hitting, it's just dealing damage over time. But with Aziri's Promise, that chaos damage over time will be leeched as life as well, which basically gives you a constant regen of life leeched from your attacks. It's just something that helps you out. For the rest of the flasks, really comes down to what you can afford, what you want. You can potentially run a Bot of Faith for a lot more damage. If you can, it's a little bit expensive, but it just basically gives you a lot more damage and crit as well. You want to run an Onslaught Flask over Quicksilver when it comes to boss fights, because it just gives you the extra attack speed. You can also run a Cinder's Urn that potentially, if you put a bit of fire damage on one of your piece of gear, you can potentially put Ignite on the target and gives you more damage on target as well. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you do have any questions, put it in the comment section. I do answer all your questions. And if you do want to support me, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come check me out on my Twitch, which is Wildkard, same as my channel's name on Twitch. Come say hi and come ask me any questions if you have with this build. Anyway, guys, I hope everyone stays safe and have a very good day, and thanks for watching.